Oh, I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Jomo. Thank you. Hey, family. I am excited to be here. Welcome to my kitchen. I know where you are all tuning in from. I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to introduce these great people, but I want to start off because this is our first official Black August programming. I have to quote my sister who wrote a seminal article on the sort of origins of Black August, and I'm about to just drop this little link into the chat in case you haven't read it yet. I want to encourage for folks who are curious, who want to know more about the origins and what it means and why we do what we do. Definitely check out this article. But this is a short quote from the article that is mostly a quote from our brother Mumia Abu Jamal that talks about Black August is a month of divine meaning, of repression and radical resistance, of injustice and divine justice, of repression and righteous rebellion, of individual and collective efforts to free the slaves and break the chains that bind us. So, ashe to that. And so, we honor the sacrifices of our revolutionary comrades with our own discipline to build our stamina, to sharpen our minds, to train our bodies, so that we can do what's ours to do in this movement for liberation. So, today, we're going to talk about some of the work that folks are doing around that and what we can do, because we're also honoring our revolutionary ancestors by remembering who they are and what they did. And we work to free those that are still behind bars. So I know that this is a webinar and y'all can't holler out loud, but I'm just gonna imagine that you're hollering when I say what's the call, and I just hear in the ethers somebody saying free them all.
Free them all.
That's right. Come on. So this distinguished crew of beautiful comrades are here tonight for the conversation, remembering political prisoners and prisoners in exile. So I'm going to do some quick introductions, and then folks are going to go in order. Please drop. I'm looking in the chat and the Q&A for questions, but we're just going to get it popping, right? So Monifa Bandele. Yeah, I won't try to editorialize. I love her so much. I could just like have a whole thing that's just me talking about her, but we're not here for that. Is an organizer with the Malcolm X Grassroots movement, a leader and longtime organizer as part of the movement for Black Lives. Monifa spent decades organizing for Black liberation in a variety of spaces, as I know many of you know, including work to free our political prisoners, as well as organizing care and support for our folk when they are released, which is also really important. Dr. Nicholas Brady is a Black writer from Baltimore and an assistant professor of critical Black studies at Bucknell University. His scholarly work investigates the ways that Blackness conceptually disturbs the politics of technology, culture, and ecology. He's currently at work on a monograph exploring the relationships between Blackness and the libidinal economy of artificial intelligence. So you already know that's going to be amazing. And then another, well, y'all are all our own, but also another one of our own, Thompson, is an anti-disciplinary artist, griot, and cultural worker. They currently serve as a national organizer for MXGM and is based in Washington, D.C. Their work blends together experimental film and literary genres centering Black anarchism, diasporic African spiritual traditions, and Black radical feminisms. So we're going to kind of go in this order. I'm going to start off with Monifa because you have done so much work, and as we're also reflecting on the life and legacy of our dear Assata Shakur, I would love for you to talk about some of your reflections and especially her own impact and leadership on our movement to free them all.
Free to land, everyone. Thank you so much to the organizers for pulling this together. Thank you, Makani, for hosting. And thanks everyone who invited us as panelists, because if there's one thing that I can't stop talking enough about, if you know me, is political prisoners, and also Mama Assata Shakur. And I think the best way to kind of conceptualize the role that she played to free them all is to tell a short story that I just heard on Saturday. So while this is the official national Black August programming here in Brooklyn, we had a program on August 1st at the Free Black Women's Library with Baba Herman Bell, who is a former political prisoner who spent 45 years in prison, member of the Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, founder of Victory Gardens, and just someone who has sacrificed so much for us as a community and for our people worldwide. And the last thing that he talked about was a story about the last time he saw his sister, Assata Shakur. He and several other comrades were on trial, not for the initial case that incarcerated them, but there was another trial that they were facing while they were already incarcerated. And this is the case of the New York Five. And while they were getting together their defense, they devised a plan because Mama Sada Shakur was already incarcerated in New Jersey. They wanted to be able to see the sister. You know, there's rumors about people and how they've been treated, and they were very concerned. So they got their lawyers together and they said, well, as we prepare for our defense for this second round of charges against us, we want to name Asada as a witness for our case so that she has to be transferred in so we can see her. We can all meet up in Rikers in preparation for testifying in this trial. And he talked about this for the first time on Saturday and talked about seeing her come in. And this is before her amazing escape from prison, and how when she was brought in, their hearts sank. She was shackled, you know, at her hands and at her feet. And for those of you who have met Mama Sada, she's small in stature, right? So it was heartbreaking to see their comrade weighed down with chains. But she came to show up, right, while being incarcerated to participate with her lawyers in strategy and testifying on behalf of her other comrades. And that was just such a powerful story that he told because it linked with everything that she taught us when we met her in the late 90s at the World Youth Festival, you know, which is that one, they always kept saying that our bodies belong to the people, not to ourselves, right? So they're very committed to this agenda of Black liberation. But also, she constantly said that you cannot sing my song, you cannot celebrate me as a heroine without working to free my comrades, without working to free political prisoners in the United States. And just to know that even decades before she's telling us that, she lived that, right? While being incarcerated in a hole in New Jersey, she was doing whatever possible to help with another case of other comrades one state over. And so those are the types of lessons that we learned from Mama Asada. When we read her book and her famous poem Carried On, you know, that just kind of really put words to the life she was already living. And I'll just end by talking a little bit about the 1997 World Youth Festival, where I think I see some folks that are on the webinar were also there. A lot of us from Malcolm X Grassroots Movement traveled down. It was a World Youth Festival of students, and thousands of young people came from all over the world, but 800 came from the United States in defiance of the embargo and of the travel blockade against Cuba. We had to travel through third countries. And when we arrived, both Sister Nihanda Abiodun and Sister Assata Shakur welcomed us with open arms, and they were our mamas on the ground. And they constantly, every day, taught us about the discipline that they learned out of their organizations. They constantly pushed Black August, which not many of us really knew about at that time. And they made us recommit, if we weren't already committed, to freeing political prisoners, to building a relationship with Sundiata Kohli, Sekou Odinga, and Mutulu Shakur. So this is the type of warrior woman this was. Even though she is away, she has escaped, right? Her mind is on the freedom of all of us. and especially on the freedom of her fellow political prisoners.
All right. I know there's already the chat's already live, but I know the chat needs to be on fire after that. I appreciate you so much and thank you. And now we're going to turn to Dr. Nicholas Brady. So I know we're going to say, I know you say Nick. Um, your work, I think, helps us get a really important context, right? Um, Around like why is this so difficult? Why is it so hard in some ways to organize? What is some of the larger cultural and political context that's shaping this, and what do we need to understand about this to break through? And I hope I still see you.
Am I
There you
here?
go.
Okay. No, no problem. Yeah, no, it's always like weird. I always feel like Zoom is always like for me, it's almost like a half stressful situation because I'm like, how do you get this thing always aligned? But yeah, I'm for one absolutely thankful to be here. And thankful for the conversation. And this really, really interesting and kind of deep question. I'll only add like maybe a couple of things maybe to think about. And then maybe we can come back and think together more. I generally do work on I guess like in terms of that the book project as that was mentioned, I do work on like AI, algorithmic violence, and how that connects with the building of prisons and policing as domestic counter-revolutionary warfare. And I think Assata absolutely both by example, by analysis, and by action demands for us to think about both. The history of this, and then also I think the way this thing has developed, and I think as well about sometimes I think how we as Black people like maybe in a broader context get very split on the Obama administration, but I think people maybe their opinion might change a little bit if they understood that during the Obama administration that he placed Assata Shakur on the terrorist watch list for the FBI, and she becomes for their own configuration. Almost like it's like proud declaration on their part of like her being the first American woman that was put on the FBI's terrorist watch list. And when I think about the meaning of that, both obviously her being like a victim of like domestic warfare, and then her also then being a part of the history of the transformation of the connection between domestic and international warfare through the category of terrorism. I think to me that connects to what we're facing and what's so difficult right now, which is all of these kind of informational technologies that are being used to compile, to watch, to survey, and to create new forms of identifying. And criminalizing political protest, political organizing, community organizing, and also internationalism as well. So I'm thinking about the recent, um, I guess, list and report that was released by Marco Rubio, connecting basically anyone thinking as well as about the story that just preceded me, anyone that is connected to Cuba and connected directly to this kind of the internationalist vision of political organizing that connects communities across the world together, and especially Black radical organizing together. There's a lot of Black folks that are on this new list that was released by Marco Rubio. And so I think, unfortunately, this the terrorism category itself, uh, and the kind of broad way that term can be applied, its kind of looseness of definition allows for an incredible amount of surveillance of a whole sorts of different types of activity. And unfortunately, as well, a labeling of both past generations of political prisoners and the production of new ones as well. And I think going forward, um, right, we have to be obviously very, very concerned in terms of the use of artificial intelligence and informational technologies as technologies of warfare. And that, of course, also includes all of the consumer technology that we all use. Like we're on Zoom obviously right now, but any of the platforms, stuff like that. These are consumer products. But I think increasingly with the FBI, they're becoming technologies of, well, really from the beginning they were technologies of warfare. But they're increasingly, I think, becoming centered and organized in ways to basically take all of our entire social lives and to condense them down into very tight profiling of folks. And so I think for me, that's one thing maybe to think about that when I think about the life of Assata is that she connects these kinds of broad histories. But I think also as well, she brings to us a kind of praxis that would make us think about both local community organizing against us, but also to still remain connected in a broad internationalist vision. Because as it was mentioned, I think by Jomo earlier, right? Um, you know, Black people are victims of genocide, but we are not the only ones. And so the violence that's going on in Palestine becomes an experimental site that then gets cross-applied back to us over here. The kinds of horrible, stringent techniques that are being used against the country of Cuba are also then brought back to the domestic. So I think as well about a kind of practice of trying to connect the international and the domestic together. I guess this is maybe one way to start, but 1 second, I can give it back over.
No, I appreciate that because it's a lot to think about. And I think in some ways, um, what COINTELPRO taught us was about the ways in which Black bodies, Black work, Black attempts, and actual winning of our freedom has tested the boundaries of those things. So thank you for that. And so I'm going to turn to Elle now, just for a moment before and y'all can start dropping your questions in the chat anytime or or use the Q&A function so we can really find them. But Elle, you have been a national organizer, you've been a culture worker, filmmaker, all kinds of things, thinking about this work from so many different perspectives. And I know you have thoughts on, how we spark this work and continue to look at it from all kinds of different perspectives and lenses. And as we sort of rethink and rededicate ourselves to our strategies to free them all. What you thinking?
Yes, thank you so much for that, Makani. And yeah, it's an honor to be on this panel with such brilliant minds and comrades. So I just wanted to put that out there. Also, Black August Resistance to everyone. And I really appreciate this prompt because when I first started organizing with MXGM in 2021, the first political prisoner campaign I was a part of was the one to free Bambatulu Shakur. And we were very successful in being able to bring him home. And in doing that, I was introduced to the various ways in which you can organize for political prisoners, right? So that is like doing public demonstrations, direct action, but then also like filmmaking, right? So Dope is Death was a film that really was instrumental in his campaign, I believe, in bringing a lot more awareness and education to people who weren't familiar with him, aside from just being Tupac Shakur's like stepfather, right? People learned a lot more about who he actually was and the work that he did, not just as a new African revolutionary, but also as a healer, right? As an acupuncturist. And that is a tradition that is still continuing on till this day, AcuDetox. And so I also think about Nahanda Abiodun and her saying that, whatever it is that you can do to lend your hand to the revolution, whether if you're like a writer, then write about the revolution. If you're a teacher, teach about the revolution. And so as a cultural worker, that is something that I try my best to do, is making sure that I bring in the political message and commitments that I have into the work, because I also know that, you know, we talk about the literacy crisis in this country. We talk about propaganda and things like that. And unfortunately, the enemy is very successful in their propaganda wars. And a lot of times, like media is very influential in the ways in which we think about ourselves, the ways we think about others. And so being able to talk about, political prisoners or Assata Shakur even, right? Through filmmaking, such as like third cinema, is really important and vital, especially right now, as we're seeing an increasing attack on knowledge and intellectualism, right? There's a rising anti-intellectualism that's happening throughout this entire country, unfortunately. Recently, there was news that came out that there's like AI software was destroying books, like scanning a lot of books, especially like rare books, and then destroying the physical copies of them. And because it garnered so much attention and pushback, they decided to stop doing it. Right. And so that is something that we are now up against. And Mama Makani, you had brought up COINTELPRO. And I think a lot about COINTELPRO 2.0. That's something that the Freedom Mall Committee with MXGM, we talk about a lot in our political education sessions, because a lot of people think that COINTELPRO is over, but it's not. It just became more sophisticated, as Dr. Nick was saying, and how, we're not starting to see an uptick in oppression coming through like technology. And, I think also about like how a lot more people referring to like 1984 are talking a lot more about like the Terminator or the movie Artificial Intelligence. And we're seeing that play out right now. Like we thought a couple of years ago, like, oh, this would never happen. This is like just fiction or whatever. And now look at what's happening. And so I believe that using cultural work and cultural organizing is a very vital tool in raising awareness, but also educating our people about political prisoners. That is something that both Comrade Monifa and her husband, Comrade Lumumba, talk about a lot. It's not enough to just talk about political prisoners or raise awareness, but we actually have to educate people on their campaigns, educate them on why it's important to get involved in the struggle. I also think a lot about a remark that Baba Ashanti Alston, a former political prisoner, Black Panther Party member, and Panther anarchist, stated in one of his panel discussions, saying that political prisoner organizing was never quote unquote like popular, right? Whether it be like in the mainstream or amongst the left, it just was not a popular thing. And I think we still, or at least in my experience, I still see that, unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to touch political prisoning organizing because it is scary, right? Like nobody wants to think that one day the FBI may knock down your door or knock down your loved one's door and haul you away in the middle of the night or early in the morning, just because you are trying to liberate people, just because you're trying to organize your communities. But this is a real thing that we have to grapple with. And although we are doing these things, I think it's okay to do it and still admit that you're scared while doing it, because it's got to get done, right? Like, yeah, I can go on and on, but I will not. But I'm just really thinking a lot about like cultural organizing in this moment, and how we can really let people understand and know, like, hey, you can be a regular person, a law-abiding citizen, right? And you're going through a checkpoint to see if you have like good, if your like tags or your registration is good. And then if it's expired, you might not know it's expired and you're hauled off to prison and nobody knows about it. Like your family doesn't know, your friends don't know, and you're just lost in the system. Right. And so it is really important for us to connect our organizing on the outside as well as the organizing that's going on the inside as well, right? Because we're starting to hear about a lot more prison uprisings, especially in like detention centers too. And I think we should start making that connection as well when it comes to organizing political prisoners. We're hearing about the hunger strikes, we're hearing about prisoners setting themselves on fire, just to try to gain some type of awareness, and let people know like about the brutal and horrific conditions that's happening on the inside. And I will yield there and pass it back to you, Mama McCartney.
Well, no, thank you for that. And before I pass it back to Monifa, I am, there's a part of me that is also thinking about narrative power, right? Because I mean, this is not just a conversation where we're just talking, right? there's a lot more going on, and also sometimes we get caught up in the present conversation that sometimes we forget that this is a conversation that's been created for 500 years, right? Like, what do Black bodies represent? What does Black freedom represent? I mean, there are people more afraid of Black freedom than they are of working for Black political prisoners, right? So, and so I wonder, in so many, I know you also are a comms head too, and I think about like the work that y'all are doing, you and Lumumba and other folks are doing, is sort of like figure out these breakout legal strategies within the context of what we've got, right? Like, so here are the rules, here are some of the things that we can think about, and how to make the system do what it do for now. But then it also feels like there's this other larger structural fight, right? That's about like what people learn in school, which the right is waging hardcore to even, it seems like, to shut down everything. But that does not mean, people say, oh, AI, that ship has sailed. I'm like, slave ships sailed too, but you didn't be like, oh, well, that's okay. They just already sailed, right? So anyway, so I would love, Monifa, for you to start us off, one, talking about some of the work that you guys have been doing, and then some of your thoughts, because you guys have been really thoughtful about some of the narrative breakthroughs yourself.
Absolutely. Well, we learned from one of the best. Her name is Makani Themba, as far as narrative strategy. But I really want to riff off of Comrade L's structure that they laid out so perfectly, because when you think about the three components that L talked about, right? One I'll call shut it down, right? Protests, being out in the streets, making sure that we are letting folks know that we are opposed to the continued incarceration of our political prisoners and the oppression of our communities, that component is key, right? And then that there's a political strategy, right? Makani, you talked about that. We got to know, so what are the rules, right? Who has to sign the paper so that this person can leave this cage, right? And what do they think about? What kind of things do they like? What kind of communities are they in? All of these types of strategies. But Elle also talked about culture and the power of our artists. And that was key to everything I talked about before when we launched the Black August Hip Hop Project, coming out of that meeting with Nahanda and Assata. Culture is powerful in ways that the political strategy and even our protest strategies are very limited. So at that time, many people had heard about Assata through her book, or maybe if they were really listening to this old Public Enemy song, there's a part where he says, follower of Chesimard. And if you knew that Joanne Chesimard was Assata Shakur, you put it together. Some of us understood that. But through this Black August Hip Hop Project, where we went and recruited amazing and powerful artists like Elle to come on the subsequent trips to meet with our mamas, they went back and created art that popularized them in ways that our brochures and our posters never could. One was Common. Common came on one of the Black August Hip Hop Project trips, and from that, he wrote Song for Asada that's on his award-winning album, like Water for Chocolate. And then we're moving around, and when we talk about Asada, people are like, oh yeah, I know who that is. I know who she is. So you've got the book, you've got Public Enemy, you've got Common Song. And what Mama Sada did that was so powerful, which I also think, I mean, tell me if you agree with this, Makani, as a narrative strategy, is she almost like held up a mirror and a shield. And so any type of attention to her story, she would reflect that back, right? And she would say, yeah, and you're celebrating me because his name is Sekou Odinga. And the brother and the comrade's name is Matulu Shakur. And my co-defendant's name is Sundiata Kohli. And she constantly would, kind of almost like bat that attention back towards the states to amplify the cases. And so we really we can't just say enough about the importance of what Elle talked about, which is our cultural artists, our comrades who can make someone's story something that's human. Because without the cultural artists, they become like mythical figures. They're icons and they're heroes, but they're almost like not human. So you think maybe I'll have to, fight for them or support them. So, I just wanted to build off of that scaffolding. And another thing that I meant to mention is that just 2 years before that, one of the biggest Black August victories that really changed my life was in 1995. People may not remember that Mumia Abu Jamal had a death sentence. He had a death sentence and he had an execution date. His execution date was August 17th, 1995. And at that point, most people were saying, there's nothing we could do about it. He has his state, he's been convicted, he's exhausted, all this and all that. The judge was awful. We weren't really getting the traction out of the politicians. And speaking to what Elle says about the power of protest, I want to shout out all the people in Philadelphia because when you talk about folks during what we call Mumia Summer, the ways that they would shut it down, right? It wasn't just free them all. It was like brick by brick, wall by wall, we're going to free Mumia Abu Jamal. But also there was this like if Mumia dies, fire in the skies, that level of people power in the streets, at the courthouses, surrounding the courthouses are such an important and powerful lever. And I think those moments show to us the power that we have, and we can carry that through to this moment. And we use many elements of that, like Elle said, in 2021 and in the freedom of some of the recent folks. And the reason why I circle back to Mumia is because there's a renewed campaign right now. I hope everybody listening is in some way plugged into a Free 'em All circle or the campaign to free Mumia Abu Jamal. You may have seen his lawyers have taken his case back to the courts, but also to the United Nations. And so there's a lot of articles and things circulating globally about Mumia. And this is how we win, y'all. So the narrative piece is key, but there's so many pieces to it. And Makanya, I don't know if you agree with me, sometimes the narrative strategy is a part of this thing that you laid out and you wrote it up, and here's the targets, and here's the audience we want. And sometimes the narrative strategy is this song that you put out. I know you're directing it at me, but I'm going to use every part of my, as I rise, I'm going to make sure I'm raising the voices of others. And that too is a powerful unnamed narrative strategy.
Well, I believe in narrative strategy in the same way I believe in everything, by any means necessary. And
Exactly.
and no,
Any and
and
all
try and
tools and by any means.
all the tools, all the things, because that's what narrative power is, right? Narrative power isn't just having a powerful story. It's like literally building power as part of an overall power strategy. So I'm glad you raised that. And then it also raises, and I want folks to jump in here that, a lot of times when we're in these periods where it feels like, well, one, there's a false story about the civil rights movement that they had a majority and that's how they won. And so people get confused between mass strategies and fringe strategies. And sometimes we in a fringe, sometimes we don't have the numbers, but we are going to block, fringe strategy is the block strategy. And when I reflect on the Mumia work, as well as lots of other work, it wasn't like there were enough Black Panthers to elect the governor of California. You know what I'm saying? But did they roll up on the state capitol? Did they stop things? Did they, and so it's like, what is our revolutionary imagination? Because what we do know is that our efforts to free them all is inextricably tied to our own freedom. That the kind of world that would free them all is also the kind of world in which we can live free. So there's no real separation, because all the things that we do, all the narratives that we tell, all the ways that we organize is building power for all of it. So I hope that people can hold that. And I don't know, Elle, if you have anything more to say about Philly or Nick, you have more things to say, but this is, come on in now, come on in. And the chat is alive. I mean, I'm loving these comments. And if folks have questions or thoughts or things they want to have elevated into the chat, let's do that. So I am checking back with you, Elle, if you have more to say about Philly or more to say, given what Monifa just said.
Yes, yeah, the Philly of it all. Shout out to the Philly comrades, honestly. I've learned so much from them, but especially from their artist. I learned about the move bombing from a documentary that I watched, right? And then also from the work of Tony Kane Bambara, who also said that it is our responsibility to make revolution irresistible. as cultural workers, as scholars, as academics, organizers, etc. And so I try my best to carry that with me as much as possible. And the same with like learning about the Mumia campaign. Also want to say rest in power to Dr. Johanna Fernandez, who recently transitioned, who was very instrumental in the Mumia campaign. I learned a lot from her work about Mumia and his struggle and his fight for liberation. And so if it wasn't for the documentaries that I came across and the films, such as like the Black Power mixtape, right, I don't think that I would be as compassionate or empathetic or even like moved, right, to actually organize on the behalf of political prisoners, right, to get into this movement of freeing them all. Because once again, like it's not something that is usually talked about within the larger or the broader like movement of leftism and organizing, right? And so it was through these like documentaries that, I found on YouTube, that I found on like canopy.com, or like Solidarity Cinema, shout out to them, that really helped me to understand like, okay, this is actually very powerful. Like you actually don't have to go through Hollywood, right, to get your message out there. There are so many ways in which you can get people in your community, because I do believe that filmmaking is a community-based practice, to actually bring these stories to life and, to Monifa's point, humanize them, right? A lot of times, just as Black people, how anti-Blackness works, right? We're villainized a lot, we're demonized, we're seen as like subhuman and as other, not deserving of empathy or love or compassion or anything like that. And so having these films and actually being able to hear their like voices, and hear like their ideas and their thoughts as political prisoners, you're like, oh, wait, no, you're not just a political prisoner, right? Like Mumia is also a husband or a widow now, rest in power to his wife. Mumia was a journalist. He was so many things. And being able to, again, just like watch these films really helped me to understand that, like, oh, okay, this could really be anybody, right? Like, so this is why we really have to fight. And to Comrade Maria's point in the chat, we have to make political prisoners, like freeing them, our number one priority.
Thank you for that. Well, I'm gonna get you in here, Dr. Nick. And this other thing I think about too, and is this that at the core of this, like at the core of what makes this possible is anti-Blackness, right? At a serious core level, right? Like when Blackness is sort of like the poster child of inhumanity, right? Like worldwide. And so we talk about like creating these spaces for people to like have compassion, like for Black people to have compassion for each other, like, and how children are becoming like a Black child is almost like you got to be a baby to be a Black child now, right? Like there's all these things. And so Nick, do we have to like are we in this place where we're trying to rehumanize in order for us to move forward? Like, where are we with this right now? And what should we be thinking about as organizers?
Yeah, no, I think that's really like one of the fundamental questions. I was thinking a little bit about when I was hearing like different comments about, like how both art, film projects, memory projects, projects that allow for people to like, as you're saying, like kind of narrativize themselves. I was thinking as well, like almost about like my own experiences, maybe connects to your point is that, I think when people are kind of coming up, even when folks have like the best intentions, what I'm saying, like Black folk, like a lot of Black folk have the best intentions in terms of thinking of themselves as like what was like that old shirt that people used to have? You can see something like "I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams," and on the one hand, like people want to put themselves in terms of a narrative of thinking of their current status as being like what is like the result of past struggle. But I think sometimes the problem, even with that kind of narrative, when people kind of wore this shirt, and they're thinking of say like I got to college and that's like my ancestors' wildest dreams. It's like, well, your ancestors' wildest dream was probably radical freedom and right, radical acceptance, radical love. And on the one hand, it's like getting a job, reaching a certain point in society or like being able to take care of yourself is like a good thing. But I think sometimes we think of like the wildest of wild dreams. I think it's hard for people if they think of everything in a kind of linear fashion. as like, oh, okay, we came from this point and then we're quote unquote going up. And I think from my own personal experience, when I was in high school and I was a part of like a community organization that eventually started doing work in prisons, and then we became organized with several of the Baltimore Panthers that were arrested unfairly, unduly, including Marshall Eddie Conway, rest in peace. For myself, that was like a powerful event because when people think in this like linear sense, you think that somehow we've been moving progressively, but when you meet folks that are like fundamentally both the victims of this god awful state that we find ourselves in, but are also fundamentally committed. Right, that the commitment has never waned and the commitment continues. Then you begin to see that it's like you're not per se like a part of this upward trajectory. We're actually a part of like a lateral condition, and that this thing actually hasn't stopped. Right, that we're in a kind of continuum. That slavery itself was a carceral phenomena, and that it's been a straight line of carcerality with Black life. From really like the 1400s to now. Right, and that folks have remained committed to like the radical dream of freedom, not freedom as in achieving a certain status or class status or something like that. I'm thinking about like how sometimes athletes think of themselves as like the victory of the civil rights movement or something like that. So not freedom as like class status, but freedom as in every single Black person is free from any type of carceral condition. I think when we put ourselves inside of that kind of narrative strategy, where when we see that there's a direct and kind of unwavering commitment across Black history to that, I think for certain folks that might connect them to something deeper. And I do think in that regard, there's all this kind of beautiful artwork that I think can help folks to have a different type of memory. Because I think the civil rights movement, there's a historian, her name's escaping me, but her work is essentially thinking about how the civil rights movement, the way that it gets taught to us, is a type of intellectual warfare or ideological warfare that makes people think that the 1960s that the 1960s was like a victory moment. And that everything after that is like the result of a victory. Versus obviously when we begin to learn the history of the 1960s, it's like, well, there's victories, and there's also the fact that the state reorganized itself and upped its terror, its means of terror, and its means of incarceration, and its means of policing and surveillance, and that has not stopped, no matter how many Black people achieve a certain type of status in the society, and even that's itself is already fragile. So in terms of my mind, to what you're saying, I think that like allowing for Black people to think of themselves as being in a direct relationship with the carceral condition of Black life, I think goes a little bit of the way towards humanizing ourselves to each other. But I think the other part of it is really just getting to a point where, can we care for each other? Like, can we care about each other? I think a lot of Black folk are know about like the unfairness, obviously both in a lived condition sense of prisons and policing. But I think it's something completely different when you understand that it's not that prisons are not just in this regard like, oh, like people find themselves in a horrible condition with the police, but that it's active domestic warfare. I think that then that allows for Black people to connect themselves to a different story, one that would demand for us, I think, to have a different commitment level. But yeah, I think that's the hard part. Anti-Blackness is it makes it really, really hard for us to connect to our fundamental humanity, and the fact that the society has done everything that it can to crush what our collective humanity could look like. But yeah, no, I completely agree in that regard.
Yeah, I
Can
appreciate
I
that.
say something real
I'll go
quick
ahead,
about
Monifa, and I want to also just
Mhm.
name that I got one question, so I want to make sure that we get it in. So Gusto, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to jump on this intellectual warfare piece because there is also a new documentary that came out that people should try to check it out when it's screening called Rediscovering Fanon and looking at the teachings and writing of Frantz Fanon. And there's a lot to this intellectual warfare in how whether it's the 50s are taught, the 60s as was named by Nick, but also the 40s, right? And it's a way that one, our movements are bifurcated, like there's almost like there was this part and there was this part, and this is like taught to us, even though you can see clearly when you read stories and you see images of whether it's King and Stokely Carmichael just like walking down the street, they're debating, like they're not totally aligned, like any of us on this call aren't totally aligned. But this way of constantly like wedging the movement and teaching it as if it was this very distinct fracture based on either tactics or overall strategies. And another piece that is done is talking about the ways that Black people are oppressed in this country as something that is like exported from somewhere else. Like it was this fascism or this thing, as opposed to white supremacy in the United States being kind of like foundational to exporting all of these atrocities that we see. So we see people in the news say stuff like, oh my God, ICE is behaving like the Gestapo. And it's like, well, who do you think the Gestapo learned from? Like, where do you think the Nazis got their tenets and their strategies from, right? American white supremacy. When people talk about, we named Cuba, the terrible and torturous prison in Guantanamo Bay that houses people, internationals, is very much modeled after control units in the 60s and 70s designed for political prisoners, for Black Muslims, right, in prisons throughout the United States. They already had designed the innovations that they were going to use to brainwash and torture people. All that stuff was foundationally practiced on us and a part of the American story and the American foundation. But when we're taught about these things, it's almost like, oh, we can't be like these fascists from Eastern Europe. What? Like before those countries even knew what they were talking about, these things were being designed here, right, to build and to maintain the capitalist structures that are in place. So I just wanted to jump on that intellectual warfare because now we have to
Appreciate
break that down constantly, and people think democracy here, fascism there.
Exactly. No, I think that's super important. And I'm also thinking a lot about Edward Said in this moment, where he talks about those roots going back centuries, the technology. And also living in Mississippi and being in the South, you're faced with the vestiges of the technology, the torture, the ways in which this all works. And I think this also gets back to some of the things about how these are structures. This is not about like bad movement decisions or people not, not having this, that, or the other, that we are in a confrontation that is not just about personalities, but they're systems. They are ways, even the ways we think, and we're colonized to think like in such linear fashions where we think, oh, first we take care of ourselves and we work on ourselves, then we work on the movement, which was like an Aristotle thing, essentially to have Greek people continue to think of themselves as slaves, because they're like, you can't rebel until you fix yourself. And people don't even realize where it comes from. So I think what you're talking about is really important. Then we got a couple of questions. So and so I want to go back to a question that Jomo raised. I don't know, Jomo, if you want to say it or you want me to just read it out loud.
I'll come off mute and save you some couple
Come
points.
on, please.
My question is really like kind of as we understand the political moment that we are in, we see, or I'm seeing, a new set of generation of political prisoners being created, whether that's the Prairie Land Nine or Palestinian activists being arrested, even deported, to the case of Malik Muhammad. And I'm just curious and kind of understanding then the previous generation of kind of COINTEL pro folks who were coming out of national liberation struggles. I guess I was curious, kind of as we look at that, or y'all are looking out, like what feels similar about these particular cases? What's different? And how do those differences and similarities shape the strategies that we might be thinking about using in our freedom all circles to help bring them home?
And I want to also make sure that Elle, if you have thoughts, I want to get you in because we haven't heard from you for a minute. So if you have thoughts, no pressure.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Yes, thinking about the Prairie Land defendants, and one of the evidence that was used against them to actually convict them were zine pamphlets. One of the defendants, he had like just like a box of zines, right? And there was one in particular that talked about The Handmaid's Tale. And she's actually a white feminist critic, film critic in Philadelphia, actually. And I read her article and she was like, she was actually critiquing the nuclear family structure. And so it was interesting to her that they used her zine as like evidence to convict him because she was like, well, I wasn't even talking about like, doing an uprising or anything like that. It wasn't like, to incite violence or anything. It was just a literal film critique, right? And so I think about that, especially as someone who's also a cultural critic, right? And I do a lot of film critiques and reviews and thinking about like, okay, do we have to get more savvy or sophisticated or like figure out like what are some ways in which when we are sharing our work and publishing it, right? Now we know that there is a possibility that the state could come after people who are reading it or have possession of it, or even us, right? So what does that look like for us to prepare for when they come for us? And it is something that I've been like deeply unsettled about, to be completely honest, because I think a lot of times um, cultural workers, we kind of think that we are somewhat removed, like we're going to be safe, like the state isn't actually going to come after us, like we're just artists, right? But we know that's not the case whatsoever. And so what does it look like to prepare on the offense, right? But also like prepare like on the defense. And I think that we just have to continue to go harder, right? I don't think that they can arrest all of us. They can't come after all of us. And so instead of retreating and being like, oh, well, maybe I'll just, stop writing or I will stop critiquing or whatnot, we have to continue to do that, and also raise awareness and once again, like use our work to educate people on the Prairie Land defendants, because it's such a bogus case if you actually read it. But unfortunately, it was successful for the state. And something else that I noticed too is that this was one of the first cases where they didn't allow public like media or like the press to come in. And so it's really hard for people to actually understand like what really happened with this case because there's no press, whether it be press as like central, like a CNN, right? They claim to be central, but we all know what it really is. Or even just like independent journalists, right? They're not able to actually tell the truth and tell the people about what really happened. And if you don't have access to the court documents, if you don't have somebody like who can help you understand like the legality, like the legal jargon of the documents or whatnot, it's really easy to believe the narrative that the state is putting out. And so, again, back to Makani and Comrade Monifa's point, with like narrative strategies, we have to really think about how we're going to get sharper with our narrative strategies. But then also like, what does it look like to educate people on how to set up a bail fund? What does it look like to educate people to set up like, I don't know, maybe having like contacts for folks just in case you are apprehended. Who do we call, right? When you come out, I'm also thinking about the care, the political prisoner care that Comrade Monifa does, along with some of our other comrades. Like, what does that look like to set that up, right? To have that strategy in place because unfortunately, it's here. I think about Pat Parker and she's like, what are we going to do when they come for us? Like meeting the fascists. And it's like, they're already coming for us, right? They're already here. So again, we just have to think really we just have to really think deeply and really commit ourselves to thinking about this and experimenting too, right? Like experimenting with things that may not exist yet, right? We might not have the solution for how are we going to get the Prairie Land defendants out of prison just yet, but we have to allow ourselves to have that space and be open to the different ideas that come from that. And think about the whole like struggle is like it's a multi-pronged struggle, not just we have to do everything that we can, and even like allow ourselves to think about something that's never happened before, that's never been invented before. So yeah, I will yield there.
Other people want to jump in. We also have another question on the tap about how do we lift up it, that the issue is white supremacy, or as my friend Hunter Adams says, white sociopathy, because he said they're not supreme. It's just a disease. But so if you want to tackle that question, um, or vibe on what Elle just said, either way, wherever this takes you, we here for it.
I want to quickly vibe on what Elle said because, there's 2 points of political prisoners and really state violence against Black movements. One, it's always been to, of course, attack, and neutralize leadership in the movements. But the other part is to instill fear, right, in the people who would be drawn to the movement for generations to come. And you see that. You see that named in all of the programs, not just COINTELPRO, the programs before that. And that's what's happening now. So it's like you don't even really need a strong case, right? Once you go after someone, you arrest them, you indict them, it's trumped up charges, everyone can see that. But that second goal of just sending that message across the country, if you dare stand up to what we're doing, if you dare speak out, right, we'll come for you, whether you stay within the law or if even if it's something ridiculous. And you see that fear and you see how people are trying to, sometimes we're trying to like bend ourselves into pretzels to say, well, how do we like avoid this state violence? How do we avoid these systems of incarceration in building our movement? And some of that is answered by the fact that these laws aren't even real, right? Like they're kind of designed to be movable depending on who the target is of the law. And that becomes just very exhausting for us as a movement. So it's just this fear tiring us out. So, just wanted to say what's happening in Prairland is a reason why when the state would kill our elders, our ancestors back in the day, they do it in the city square. It'd be public. It's not like we're gonna take you out back, right? It's because we want to send a message. And that's what's happening now. It's this ridiculous. I mean, zines, stories that have existed before. You like, someone also is facing DOJ charges because when they were asked for a code for their phone, they gave a code that wiped the phone clean, and that's a federal, felony charge. So these types of things are to send a clear message that, just don't even bother, don't resist. But, we're not listening to that.
Resistance is futile.
That's what they want us to think. I mean, that brings it back to Black August, which hopefully we'll get back to the
We're
study
coming back.
fast train fight.
We're coming back because this is why we do it. So we are ready. And we build our numbers because we know this is not a game. Any other reflections? Because before we did, anyone want to respond to the question that was raised about how to raise this question of white supremacy with our people, so we are not just blaming each other, and can see the larger picture and structures behind it. I mean, and I know part of that is how we tell the stories, how we work, and also how we fight for an education where people get to learn that and understand that, right? And even our games, because games are an important cultural tool too, how we play and how we understand things. But what we got, some thinking on that question or others?
I mean, I don't have like an answer per se, in that regard, but I do think it's an interesting question, because, how to put it, I feel like, it's almost like also trying to get people to pay attention to what's going on right now. Because I'll say it's the one thing I'll give the Trump administration credit for, is that they make white supremacy look as stupid as it is, and I think some administrations really try to make it look a certain type of, like, oh, I have all these like really, really smart, intelligent people that are up here doing horrible things. But I think to me, like, sometimes there are moments wherein white supremacy reveals itself for being, we just want a white face here. We don't care about skill, talent, intelligence, even the appearance of it. I mean, I think in a certain degree, I think maybe one thing I've been thinking a lot about is trying to like get folks to to realize there's a reason why we have something like the Trump administration right now, and I think a part of it is because the wealthy people in this country have gotten tired of putting a mask on their power, and Trump gives them an excuse to be out loud with their corruption. I mean, their pedophilia, their horrible things they're doing. They're doing quote unquote behind the scenes that are now just in people's faces. Them flouting the law, even the appearance of it. And I think to a certain degree, it tells us something, I think, about the structure of the U.S. empire that I think we've reached a point in which it's like mask off with them. Like they're not really trying to put a mask on power. They're kind of gallivanting around as if there's nothing that anybody can do about what they're doing. And I think to a certain degree, there's a kind of clarity that comes with that. And I see that with a lot of folks, there's a kind of growing clarity um, that what you're in is not even like the appearance of fairness or whatever, but that it is as ugly as it actually is. But I think on the other side of that, it's also then trying to get folks to realize it's not inevitable. It's not inevitable. And I remember you were saying earlier that some people say like you were saying like that the vote is already out on AI. I'm like, it's not. It's not. I think in the past like year, movements have gotten $180 million worth of data centers to be crushed, and they know it. Like they know at this point in time that people don't like AI. It's unpopular. There's like young people at graduations that are booing speakers in open public at their own graduations because it's not popular. Nobody likes it. Um, and I think at this point in time, they know that they have to use their power to enforce it and to force it down people's throats. And so that puts them, I think, in a vulnerable position that's maybe also advantageous for us, which is to say it's bare knuckle politics at this point. And I think in that degree, then people power takes on an incredible strength because now there's a kind of clarity and stakes in terms of getting people across different political divides. Maybe folks who maybe formerly would not have been in favor of, say, just closing down every data center, now understand it's like, no, it's coming for everything. And I think the same thing for surveillance. And I think about these cases where, yeah, I mean, they're getting folks for zines. They're getting folks for things you just say online, post, um, and they're using these kinds of different charges. Um, the terrorism charge, I think to kind of maybe Jomo's or maybe relating the two questions together. Um, the terrorism thing to me, the scary part about it is that it exists in that federal government territory. And that's the reason why they could do that trial and you can't get a media into it is because once you get into a domestic terrorism, it gets out of the domestic category and it gets into foreign military territory, which allows for them to just like demolish all the checks, the quote unquote checks and balances that exist. And so I think for us, like there is something I think about narrative to actually getting folks to understand like the terrorist charge itself is political because I think some people still believe there's some actual meaning to what a terrorist means, and I think maybe it's important work to be done for folks to realize that at this point in time they're trying to label anybody a terrorist. Um,
Mhm.
like it can be anybody at this point. You just come on and say, I don't like ICE. I don't like them executing people in the streets. You don't have any politics behind it. You have no organizing. You're not doing anything, right? And there are folks that are that have had knocks at their door. Again, they have no organizing behind it. It's just statements, and they get a knock on the door from the FBI. So that's one, their power, but I think it also tells us something about their vulnerability. Why are they, the level of desperation, the level of which they're doing this wide dragnet? Um, I think it tells us something, I think, about their own vulnerability. And I think that should actually embolden us going
Well, I,
forward.
I appreciate that. I just want to clarify, though, that when I was talking about the ship sailing, I didn't mean that
Oh,
in the way that I just wanted to clarify that what I
no, I
meant
was
was
agreeing with you. Yeah.
people say that, but it's not
Yes.
true.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
we can't fight a thing just because the ship sailed. So I just want to make sure that, yes, that we agree. And then the other thing I just want to, as folks jump in, and also if you have any closing comments, we should probably start turning that corner. But and this is more reflection of also what I'm reading in the chat that um, yeah, well, it almost stupid is the purpose, right? Because it definitely there is um, years ago, Gene Hardesty, who studies the right, said this in the 80s that the right was trying associates smart people, black people. Like there's a whole range of things that are associated that are like for regular white folks to hate. Like you want to hate smart people. You don't want to be the one who actually like reads your Bible and knows what it says, read the books, knows what it says. So I wonder, as we're thinking about this, and we're also thinking about strategies, um, and the amount of our people who are sending us, if you have cousins like me who are in your DM sending you some crazy ass video about some wildness, that you're like, wait, we were raised by good people, why is this something that you are actually paying attention to, right? Like there's a thing in which our house is under attack, right? Like as a people, that we're also thinking about. And then so it's like, how we're thinking about that, and which is all related, like because where are black people getting their information and deciding it's trustworthy? Well, how are we understanding this these moments? And yes, I mean, Jackson passed a moratorium on data centers. Come through Jackson, like, there's definitely these places of hope. So Elle, I'm gonna jump and ask you if you have other thoughts, including closing thoughts. Um,
Yeah, to the question around talking to our people about white supremacy, right? Getting them to make that connection. Um, I think just talking to people, and making it plain, being like, hey, what we're seeing, it is not our fault. Like they want us to think it's our fault, right? But it's actually not. Like this is a tool of white supremacy. Um, Such as the whole like what is it, getting people like in DC, right? They are going hard on our young people, and calling it like teen takeovers, right? And it's even like black people, even some black parents are on television being like, yeah, I want the cops to come and lock my kid up. Like I keep calling the cops on my kid to take them to juvie, but they're not doing anything. Like, or they'll take them and then they like release them again. And I I could understand why they would think that's a solution, but it's actually not a solution, right? It's like you're literally just turning your kid over to the state to be really a slave for real of like prison labor for the state. And it's not effective, right? DC, like my goodness, the just the police budget alone, right, is ridiculous. And a lot of these social like resources or programs that could go to the youth, right, even mental health services, it's just not afforded to them, unfortunately. So it's easier to make them seem like, okay, these bad black kids, right? Because they never talk about the white kids. They never talk about the white rich kids up in like wards 4 or ward 1. It's always the black kids in ward 7 and wards 8 that we need to be afraid of, that we need to, be terrified of. And that's just not true. But again, it is just white supremacy, right? Trying to make us think that we actually are quote unquote animals, right? We're uncivilized, we're subhuman. We need carceral punishment in order to be quote unquote productive citizens, which we know once you go on the inside, it changes your life. It literally rewires your entire brain. And even your DNA, if we want to talk about trauma and how it impacts our bodies and is passed down from generation to generation. So just like, again, making it plain, like making these like day-to-day connections. It doesn't have to be super like huge, but just day-to-day connections. And if people want to go deeper, then you can start to introduce like certain theories and like ideologies to help them understand. And I also think just studying together, like being like, hey, do you want to study something together, or do you want to watch this documentary together? So you can really understand what it is that I'm trying to say. Because a lot of times, again, like we're they would want us to be divided, and they know that like if we actually come together, how much stronger and effective we are, because it technically is more of us than it is them. However, like they don't, the white people, the white oppressors, whomever, they don't want that to happen, right? So they want us to also help them, right, in perpetuating white supremacy, and giving us these tools to do so. So I think that is a good way to start. And also want to preface too, like I'm not in the South, I'm not from the South, so I know like the ways in which I organize in a community with people may be a little different than how it is in the South. But yeah, just like trying to figure out how to make those connections, even if it's like talking to your barber, right, or your hairstylist or your neighbor. Um, I think that's a great way to start. And a closing thought that I have, since we're in Black August and it's Black August Resistance, I just want people to remember too, like Black August is not a celebration. It is a commemoration, right, of our political prisoners. And we should be trying to figure out how to dedicate ourselves to each of the four tenements, which is study, train, fast, and fight, right? What are we going to study? Like what text from a political prisoner, preferably, are we going to study to sharpen our understanding of political prisoners, but even like just how this world operates in general. Fasting, whether it be from, if you can't fast from food, if you can't fast from like water, fasting maybe from social media, fasting from, I don't know, driving and taking public transit. That's something that I'm doing, but it's also because the gas prices. But definitely, I want to be able to connect with my community more too, right? If I'm just in my car, it's hard to connect with people, but I'm on the bus, it's easier for me to talk to folks that way, or taking the train, or just waiting at the bus stop. Training, right? What does it look like to actually train your body, if you can, right, for this fight that we are up against? And then figuring out like, what do you want to do? Like, how do you want to get involved in this fight? And again, like I always say, you don't have to be on the front lines, like busting back at people or things like that. You can write, right? If you have a newsletter, dedicate one of your publications to Black August, something that you read during Black August. Um, if you are a teacher, if you can, right, slide something in your curriculum about Assata Shakur or about Mumia Abu-Jamal, right? But there are so many different ways in which we can participate and honor Black August. And again, like just constantly remembering, like, do not forget our political prisoners and those behind the walls, because it is so easy to forget them, especially with us being just like all this information just being thrown at us, right? It's easy to get caught up in everything that's happening in the world right now, but we have to remember our political prisoners, because again, like that could be any one of us at any given day. And so, yeah, that's the closing thought I have. And again, I'm just so grateful to be on this panel, and I feel very well nourished and fed from everything that we've all talked about.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to give Mo the last word.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you, Elle. Thank you, Makani. Study, fast, train, fight. Black Arts Resistance flows through those, as Elle named. And I just wanted to underscore a few things. One, that study is resistance to the anti-intellectualism that we named, right? Each one of these is a way to resist. And so every time we nourish our brains and our intellect, we are resisting a very key and sharp tool of the oppressor, which is anti-intellectualism. Fast. We gotta have some discipline, y'all. I mean, that was like one of the biggest lessons when we went to World Youth Festival. Mama Sada and Mama Nana was like, y'all had no discipline. Y'all gotta get it together, right? You gotta get it together. And we have to really train ourselves to be able to sit with something that is uncomfortable, right? We have to give up something. I mean, Elle laid it out eloquently. Like, yes, it could be fasting from food, but you know what you need to practice giving up. We don't even have to name it for you. You know it's somewhere deep inside of you. And so that second piece is another piece of resistance, because it's preparing you for the last one, because it's giving you some discipline. and train, sharpen the tool in your toolbox, right? Like we said earlier, if you're a teacher, teach. If you're a writer, write. If you're an artist, paint. But sharpen that tool, train on it, use the month to really hone it and make it as powerful as possible. And finally, fight. Frantz Fanon taught us in Wretched of the Earth. If you haven't read it, please pick it up. He said the colonial project is a project of total violence, right? You're never not in it. You can't ever say like, "Oh, I'm not political. Oh, I'm just, I'm about this and I'm just kind of over here." Because he's basically naming that you're in this project. It's a project of total violence, right? If you're not resisting that violence, you're bringing it in, right? The call is coming from inside the house. You're going to inflict horizontal violence. You're going to internalize the violence. And you are also going to severely damage yourself, psychologically. And so when we say fight, when we say resist, this means actually preserving your mind, body, and soul by recognizing that you are in a fight. Right? You have because you in the fight either way. You either getting beat up or you fighting back, right? This is what Fanon is teaching us. And basically, he really lands the point of that if we don't resist, we are collaborating with that violence. So absolutely study, fast, train, and fight Black August resistance.
Thank you. Thank you all. Can we get some love in the chat for our folks? Appreciate y'all. Y'all threw it down, threw it down, threw it down. And yes, we are here. And we all know that part of the warfare on Black people is the food that is the, or is the environment. And we're in that place where and Black August is a 365, 366 day a year project, but especially this month. Um, really appreciate this opportunity for us to focus. For folks who are in chapters or on the national chat who are on this call, I encourage you to drop your commitments in public. Let's go. Let's support each other. Get you a buddy, get you a comrade to support you so that you're not doing this by yourself and then you give up on yourself. And whatever that is, I know some of you are trying to do burpees each day or trying to which is a good thing, last year it was me learning how to swim better. So we are all working on ourselves. So let us support each other. Let us declare what we're doing. And yes, let us lift up my comrade and my friend, ancestor, Baba Shokwe Lumumba, whose birthday was yesterday, who taught us so much about that and taught me so much about that over our almost 50-year friendship, which I appreciate. So Jomo, take us home.
All right. Free to land, everyone. Once again, give a round of applause for Makani and our outstanding panelists. Let me figure out how to cut my camera on so I can get on camera, throw myself on the spotlight. Phew. Why did I do this? Let me. Oh, there it is. All right, here I am. All right, so we got a couple of things for folks to do. One, we want you to grab the 2026 Black August Handbook. Maria's been working on it, got it together. That includes all the ways that you can learn how to fast, study, train, and most importantly, fight for the freedom of our political prisoners. It contains the calendar, a lot of things, and then ways that we can take action together. So oh, you can't access the PDF? We'll send out the link to that for folks. I'll grab that. And then we also want to invite folks to the remaining of our Black August programming that we kicked it off yesterday with the PE doubleheader with the Revolutionary Real Talk Part 3. We'll be back together on Monday, August 17th from 5 to 7 with a special Revolutionary Sons and Daughters Support a Son of a Revolutionary. This will be an event to raise awareness and support for former Jackson Mayor Antar Lumumba, as he heads into sentencing in October. And then the next day on RNA 11 Day on Tuesday, August 18th from 7:30 to 8:30, we will have Real Talk with Revolutionary Writers Part 4. It's going to be stacked. We have Brother Edward Onasi leading a panel of prolific African writers, new African writers with Baba Ake, Amama Nkichi, with Black Power Lawyer, as well as Paula. I'm drawing a blank on her last name. Seniors, with May Mallory and World Revolutions, as well as I'm drawing a blank on the last one, but it is packed out. Oh, that's who it is. The daughter of Mama Tawu, who wrote the book 1148 Lewis Street, again about her time in the New African Independence Movement. So that'll be Tuesday, the 18th, and then we close our programming on Tuesday, the 25th at 7 o'clock, with a martial arts and kind of new African liberation workshop. We'll come up with a title for that. And that's going to be on the 25th. So that'll be our national program. And I'm going to drop the full link there. And then we want to invite folks to stay connected with us on our Instagram and other social media channels to connect with local Black August activities. So with that, oh, let me drop this real quick. I'll drop the shareable link for folks um, for the handbook. So you can get it right here as a shareable link. And again, thank you all so much. We've completed our program. Again, want to give love to Z and the Assata Shakur Summer School and all the visible labor of folks bringing it together for another year. And we are complete. All right, got it. Get that shareable link. All right. What's the call? Free them all.
Free 'em all.
Come on, Black August resistance, everyone.